fellow Bixby, he was a great craftsman and did some wonderful things. And if I do say so myself, Leo was prone to copy him.
It was the first one that Leo and I built in the first year we were together, when mostly it was done at night, design. It looks almost exactly like the Telecaster, still. I mean, the shape, the head had 3 keys on each side of the head rather than the 6 in line on one side. And it was the only one built with that type of neck on it. Of course, we tried many, many things before we came up with the final design on it. But after we got that final design, there were very few changes made from that until we went into the production of it.
I took the first guitar to the show back in 1949 or 1950, somewhere back in there, and showed it. And it was, what's that thing? You know, and we got all kinds of comments. What is that? You paddle your canoe with that thing? Or you swat flies? What do you do with it? But they all laughed, you know, and about that time we started getting some of them into some of the Western bands. And they were the forerunner of the whole thing, the rock and roll and everything else.
So I think you wanted to make a very simple but versatile guitar, one that you could instantly get a rock sound or country sound by using the bridge pickup, and then when you went to the neck you had an instant softer sound for more jazzy type things.
It seems that like country bands picked up on it first, right? It would appear that Leo was a fan of that sort of music and enjoyed visitors to the Fender factory, and I guess he had his first prototype as a loaner, and he would lend it out to the country bands and see what they thought of it. And I'm sure that through their feedback, that was his R&D department of sorts, and he'd make modifications and things that the players requested.
He listened to everybody, and he had, oh, I know Bob Wills and all of his players used to come down to the Fender factory all the time when they were through and tell them what they liked, tell them what they didn't like. I know he had quite a good relationship with Buck Owens and Jimmy Bryant. Jimmy Bryant, I think, was one of the first guys that they would, and they would take guitars and amps out to guys in the clubs when they were designing them.
Some people debate now who invented the solid body guitar. Was it Les Paul with the log, or App, who made a few solid body guitars, or Leo Fender? Well, I think it's pretty self-evident that Leo Fender, while he didn't invent the solid body guitar, did have the first truly commercially successful solid body guitar that sold.
Out of this somewhat irreverent, or at least experimental spirit of California came the first production solid body guitar. A few people embrace it. The manufacturers don't. They turn down their noses. He's bolting the neck to the guitar. He's just taken a board and band sawing a shape and putting strings on it. You call that a guitar? It's a plank of wood. The problem is, those guitars stayed in tune, they were bright, they were durable, they weren't that expensive, they performed well, they were very promising. First called Esquire, made in such limited quantities at first it could almost be called prototypes or pre-production. Then Broadcaster. Gretsch had a set of Broadcaster drums, protested Fender's use of the name, and they changed it to Telecaster, which is the common name that we think of today. Leo Fender introduced his first production model electric Spanish guitar in 1950, and the following year he introduced the first electric bass. Interestingly enough, his idea in the electric bass was to give the guitar player an instrument that he could double on. It was not so much that he was going to go out and get all those acoustic stand-up players a new instrument, which he did. But guitar players who'd complained to him, you know, they could make more money if they could double on another instrument. He, in a flash of genius, saw that the acoustic bass had all of the defects and flaws, as he saw them, that other acoustic instruments had. It was imprecise. he could build an instrument that one could play with precision. Mainly, it had frets. You could hold it like a guitar. Instead of that imprecise character, which gives the acoustic bass its very quality, its very personality, now we'll have frets, and you can play with precision. But of course, what the electric bass did, along with the electric guitar, was it made it possible for a trio or a quartet to make a lot of music.
Well, once you made it heard, and the guitar player could outplay the drummer, then you had something going. You had a real deal going, and you had a lot of noise going. And between the guitar player and the drummer, they outplayed the bass, and that's the reason we came along with a solid body bass. The bass player had to be heard too. So we had to make a solid body bass, and to make an amplifier to stand up under bass treatment. And when they could all be heard, and of course, not only the Western band, but then the rock bands came along, and the louder they played, the better they were. It didn't make a difference if they played well or not, as long as they played loud.
There wasn't such thing as electric bass. So we started building, and we created bodies a little larger and a little longer neck. And also the keys, we had to take keys that were made for those big upright basses and cut them down. That brought us to another problem. Where would you get a string to work on a magnetic pickup? Because the early basses used what they referred to as catgut strings. To make those strings work on a magnetic pickup, right where it passed over the magnetic pole, we wrapped fine wire on those strings because the early basses used what they referred to as catgut strings.
Another thing you could do with a solid body is, aside from its being small, and aside from your ability to make it in any kind of outline you wanted, once you've got that solid body, you can sand it, taper it, cut it away. The sky's the limit. You can make it any shape you want, and it'll still function as electric guitar. So again, the solid body is lending itself to modification, and once again, the sky's the limit.
I had seen a broadcaster, and the guitar player let me fool with the thing during intermission, and it was an excellent playing guitar. The action was just tremendous. And he was getting some sounds out of it that I couldn't possibly get out of my guitar. And he told me about Leo Fender. And went out there, and the first thing I did was look up Leo Fender. And I bought a Telecaster guitar and a Pro amp, I believe it was the amp. And I didn't have any money, and I paid him $18 a month and swept the floor, and he used my ears. He didn't have any measuring equipment electronically. He couldn't tell sharp and flat, or he couldn't tune, and he didn't know pitch definition or nothing.
Bill was a musician, traveled with the band, and also he was a studio musician. And then Bill used to go out and field test a lot of the things we did. He would take the instrument out with a different kind of a pickup or a different kind of a part, where it was, and he would try it. Bill was a very big help in all his new design. Rex Scallion also was another man that used to press as hard and make some changes on it. And Jim Bryant. And of course, soon after that, we provided some guitars for him to use, and this set the thing really rolling because everybody wanted to play like Jimmy Bryant.
Don Randall was also pushing Leo to add another guitar to the line. And so Freddie Tavares came on board about then. He drew this instrument up. Now, after Freddie Tavares came on board, he not only was a good engineer, musically he was such a genius. And so it was much easier for Freddie to be a conduit of your own ideas and get things done then, because he knew what you were talking about.
Bill played a Telecaster, but he wasn't very pleased with it. For one of the reasons, you couldn't adjust each string individually on the bridge for its height and length, for the intonation of the string. Bill says we should have it so that each string has its own bridge section, so it can be raised or lowered or lengthened or shortened to make the proper intonation. Now, the intonation, it means when you know the string down here, some particular note, that thing, if it doesn't know in tune, then you may have to adjust your length of your string. See, from the string, from the bone nut to the bridge is set a certain length. And all these other notes are set accordingly because of that string length. But if you find a note in here that's not noting properly, it means that this string length, from wherever you're noting to the top of the bridge, is the wrong length.
6 bridge sections you just had to have them in order to make the thing in today. Guys would borrow my guitar and not bring it back. It was so good, especially guys who recorded out there on the West Coast. I'd have to get out and chase it down. And I'd say, go out to this little tin building in Fullerton in the orange grove there and see this guy Leo Fender and get him to make you one like it.
Kind of a Stratocaster, that was kind of evolved from the Telecaster, from the basic plan of the guitar. It did have a lot of new ideas that wasn't on the Telecaster, like the vibrato. We would try different kinds of pickups and different windings and different many kind of things, different types of wood as we designed. We would test apart. And finally, you get something put together that looks like it might be working.
Leo was uncanny in that he could take somebody else's ideas, and if you could get the thought across to him, he could make it happen. He could figure the size of the screw, the amount of threads per inch, and all of that in his mind, and put it on a piece of an envelope, and then go out there and make it.
Of course, at the same time, we had to design some of our tooling, like machinery as well as tooling to make, like the parts. We had to have tooling made, and we had to build a lot of the machinery that did the shaping and the different things for the guitar. We had to have it built, design the machinery and have it built, and build some of it ourselves. And since it was such a new industry, there was nothing available to buy. You couldn't go out and buy a piece of machinery to make a guitar neck. Well, Forrest came in, I believe it was in about the middle of 54. Forrest had a lot of good things going for him on things like time studies and personnel. So he was put in there, and he did personnel, took care of all the payroll. And
Forrest came on board to handle manufacturing and did a very credible job of it. It got to the point where we'd grown to a considerable degree, and it just wasn't possible for Leo to do it all. He had to give up part of it. And he gave up the part that he probably liked less, and that was out there on a day-to-day basis, seeing the machines ran and the paint got on.
When he asked me if I come in and help him run the company, he was in a mess financially. Some of the employees' paychecks were bouncing. He had very little credit. He had to pay cash for most of his material.
Forrest straightened out some of the processes and got some efficiencies going that we didn't have before. And you could see places where Leo was doing things because he liked it that way, but he was able to change it to where it was more efficient, and he did an incredible job there. I'll say that. He contributed a lot to the company as far as making things go. He was effective.
There's some controversy on how Leo happened to make the Stratocaster in the first place, and some people say that it was made for a particular musician. Well, I worked with Leo all those years, and the first time I heard that was after Leo passed away.
Marketing wanted a superior, higher priced instrument, a prettier instrument. And every time we did this, we put it out with a number of musicians, got their ideas on it, their suggestions on it. And when we felt we had enough of them, we made a composite of all these ideas and tried to incorporate them in the guitar. So that we'd have the best features of everything that they were talking about.
The Stratocaster was not designed for any particular person. It was designed to broaden the line, and see, we had quite a few salesmen at that time, and they had to have something to sell. So many people contributed ideas. Freddie contributed a lot of them. Bill Carson was the one that told Leo that, he said, Leo, he said, on this guitar, this new one you're working on, he said, that guitar should fit you just like a shirt. Well, when Bill was referring to his shirt, you must understand, he was playing guitar. Now, he played lead guitar with Hank Thompson. Bill was a heck of a good musician. And when he was talking about shirts, he meant a Western kind of shirt, and those babies fit tight. So when he was talking about that guitar should fit you like a shirt, he meant something that was going to be snug, that you could play, that was going to be very comfortable.
I insisted that the instrument balance on me, because everyone that I had up until then wanted to fall either to the right or to the left. In order to use whatever dexterity you've got between your two hands, you need to be free to play the instrument and not support it one way or the other. So the horn on the top of the Stratocaster grew and grew in an effort to balance the guitar. And Freddie Tavares said it wouldn't look quite so ugly if you put a horn on the bottom to give it a little bit of symmetry.
Freddie was a unique individual. He was a Hawaiian, of course. He used to play with Harry Owens, and great Hawaiian guitar player, standard guitar player. He was the first one that Leo had in the system in there that I recall. He did a lot of the work, a lot of the legwork, and I'm sure he contributed a lot to the ideas too.
Production really picked up at that time. We moved the first part of it over onto Raymond Avenue into the new buildings. I think it was March of '53 when we moved into the first building. I don't recall many Sundays that I ever went by there that his car wasn't parked out there. He worked 7 days a week. He would not have any children because of the business itself was his child. He explained that to me one time, that there was no time for children if you owned the business. And he would work to the degree that his health almost cost him his life.
Leo was very dedicated. He stayed in the lab there or in the shop, and that was his work and his hobby. And he worked at it 24 hours a day and seldom did anything else. And he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't like anybody did. He got to the point where he wanted to get out of the business. He thought he'd achieved what he wanted to do, and he didn't see a whole lot of future in it anymore. Everybody knows was the ultimate sale of CBS in 1965, January 1965.
He played saxophone. A bright student, was basically self-taught. He liked to experiment with anything electrical. He opened a radio repair shop, and his interest was in tubes and radios and speakers. He patented a phonograph changer. And one of the things that he did was he offered to repair instruments, electric instruments. People would bring them in. Of course, he would look at them and think to himself, I could build a better one. That's really where his inspiration came from. Leo Fender wasn't a guitar player. He could care less about that European tradition, you know, the Geppetto-like craftsman, you know, chipping. He thought that was ridiculous. He was a production guy. He was a manufacturer. He was interested in mass production. He thought it was very inefficient to build guitars the old way. They had too many pieces. They had too many steps, too many stages. There was too much glue. There was too much carving. There was too much this. There was too much that. I can build a guitar out of a plank of wood, and it'll play better than your guitar, and it'll be louder, and it'll stay in tune, and it'll sound purer, and it'll have more high end, and you can do more with it, and it'll last longer. And if anything ever goes wrong with the neck, I'm going to bolt the neck to the guitar, and you can take that neck off, and I'll replace it for you.
Well, the story starts, I think, we're back in about 1940. At that time, I was operating a small radio parts store in Santa Ana and selling radio parts to Leo Fender. And we got to be pretty friendly during that time, and that carried on up to the time when I went in the Army. And I went in the Army, and of course Leo didn't go in the Army because he had one eye, and of course they didn't want anybody shooting a gun that had only one eye. So Leo probably scrounged around and got a few parts together, and they had made 2 or 3 amplifiers at that time. But there just weren't parts of the necessary type available. And eventually, they got to fiddling around with Doc Kaufman, and started developing some of these things. And Doc, of course, had the pickup ideas.
Of course, Doc was Leo's first partner in the guitar business. And they built small amplifiers and the small lap steel guitars. And Doc was a guitar player himself, a very good one. And he played in groups, bands and did things. And was very well liked and very intelligent for the electronics. And I think he played a big part in designing the electronic pickup, because I really think he was probably one of the people that encouraged Leo a great deal to get into this.
There were various groups of people in Southern California guitar community who at various times you sort of mix and match and get different groupings. In the 20s, there was John Dopiera and his brothers, and they were affiliated with Rickenbacker. They were affiliated with George Beecham. George Beecham and Paul Barth would later design the frying pan guitar manufactured by Rickenbacker. Doc Kaufman, who had worked with Barth, knew all about Rickenbacker guitars, was very closely associated with Rickenbacker, would become Leo Fender's first partner in guitar manufacturing. F.C. Hall, who acquired the Rickenbacker company from Adolf Rickenbacker, was the owner of Radio Tel, which was Fender's first distributor. So there is this nexus of Kaufman, Fender, Rickenbacker, Beecham, Barth, Dopieras, all sort of working in various groups together at different times, say from the 20s up through, say, the 40s.
I was selling them from the very beginning, promoting them from the very beginning. They had no outlet to sell them except maybe a trickle out of the local store they had there. After World War II, the lap steel was a big item. The first K&F guitar was the lap steel. We started out with a very simple 6-string lap steel, we went to an 8-string to 10-string, went to the double necks, and so it was just a natural progression. Our first amplifier and first guitar were made out of wood, and they were a gray crackle finish, just like the gray crackle you find on instrument cabinets and things like that. I think that Doc was a little bit afraid of Leo and the way he operated at that moment. And Doc had been through the Depression and one thing and another, and he had his family to think about, so I think that he just felt he could do better and be more secure on his own. It was an amicable arrangement.
Doc Kaufman and Leo were in business as partners before I came on the scene. And I got acquainted with Leo, and finally one day he says to me, I have some new buildings that I'm going to be moving into. And he said, why don't you come over and work a day or two or three and see what you think about what we're doing. And I told him, I said, I don't really like steel guitars, and I'm not that much interested in building amplifiers. He said, well, I'm kind of interested in trying, to come up with a solid body electric guitar.
Naturally, the idea had to be stimulated there someplace, because you could play the steel guitar loud without feedback, but you couldn't play a box guitar loud without feedback.
Merle Travis probably was the first musician in this area, at least, that had a solid body electric guitar, which was built by Paul Bixby.
And I think I'm correct in saying that Paul Bixby was the one who developed the first standard guitar. Because before we ever had one, I was in Richmond, Virginia with our salesman down there. And Travis was down there in the studio. We went to the studio with him. And he was playing one at the time, and I told him about it. The head and everything that we eventually developed followed pretty closely the design that Bixby had on his original guitar. The only trouble with Bixby, he was a great craftsman and did some wonderful things. And If I do say so myself, Leo was prone to copy it.
It was the first one that Leo and I built in the first year we were together. Well, most of it was done at night, design. It looks almost exactly like the Telecaster, still. I mean, the shape, the head had 3 keys on each side of the head rather than the 6 in line on one side. And it was the only one built with that type of neck on it. Of course, we tried many, many things before we came up with the final design on it. But after we got that final design, there was very few changes made from that until we went into the production of it.
I took the first guitar to the show back in 1949 or 1950, somewhere back in there, and showed it. And it was, what's that thing? You know, and we got all kinds of comments. What is that? You paddle your canoe with it?
For more jazzy type things.
It seems that like country bands picked up on it first, right? It would appear that Leo was a fan of that sort of music and enjoyed and those kind of people. And by all accounts, they were frequent visitors to the Fender factory. I guess he had his first prototype as a loaner, and he would lend it out to the country bands and see what they thought of it. And I'm sure that through their feedback, that was his R&D department of sorts, and he'd make modifications and things that the players requested.
He listened to everybody, and he had, oh, I know Bob Wills and all of his players used to come down to the Fender factory all the time when they were through and tell them what they liked and what they didn't like. I know he had quite a good relationship with Buck Owens and Jimmy Bryant. Jimmy Bryant, I think, was one of the first guys that they would, and they would take guitars and amps out to guys in the clubs when they were designing.
Some people debate now, who invented the solid body guitar? Was it Les Paul with the log, or App, who made a few solid body guitars, or Leo Fender? Well, I think it's pretty self-evident that Leo Fender, while he didn't invent the solid body guitar, did have the first truly commercially successful solid body guitar that sold.
Out of this somewhat irreverent, or at least experimental spirit of California came the first production solid body guitar. A few people embrace it, and manufacturers don't. They turn down their noses. He's bolting the neck to the guitar. He's just taken a board and band sawing a shape and putting strings on. You call that a guitar? It's a plank of wood. The problem is, those guitars stayed in tune, they were bright, they were durable, they weren't that expensive, they performed well, they were very promising. Had a set of broadcaster drums, protested Fender's use of the name, and they changed it to Telecaster, which is the common name that we think of today. Leo Fender introduced his first production model of electric Spanish guitar in 1950, and the following year, he introduced the first electric bass. Interestingly enough, his idea in the electric bass was to give the guitar player an instrument he could double on. It was not so much that he was going to go out and get all those acoustic stand-up players a new instrument, which he did. But guitar players had complained to him, you know, they could make more money if they could double on another instrument. He, in a flash of genius, saw that the acoustic bass had all of the defects and flaws, as he saw them, that other acoustic instruments had. It was imprecise. He could build an instrument that one could play with precision. Mainly, it had frets. You could hold it like a guitar. Instead of that imprecise character, which gives the acoustic bass its very quality, its very personality, now we'll have frets, and you can play with precision. But of course, what the electric bass did, along with the electric guitar, was it made it possible for a trio or a quartet to make a lot of music.
Well, once you you made it heard, and the guitar player could outplay the drummer, then you had something going. You had a real deal going, and you had a lot of noise going. And between the guitar player and the drummer, they outplayed the bass, and that's the reason we came along with a solid body bass. The bass player had to be heard too. So we had to make a solid body bass, had to make an amplifier to stand up under the bass treatment, and then we could all be heard. And of course, not only Western band, but then the rock bands came along. And the louder they played, the better they were. It didn't make a difference if they played well or not, as long as they played loud.
There wasn't such thing as electric bass. So we started building, and we created bodies a little larger and longer neck. And also the keys, we had to take keys that were made for the big upright basses and cut them down. That brought us to another problem. Where would you get a string to work on a magnetic pickup? Because the early basses used what they referred to as catnip strings. And to make those strings work on a magnetic pickup, right where it passed over the magnetic pole, we wrapped fine wire on those strings because the early basses used what they referred to as catnip strings.
Another thing that you could do with a solid body is, aside from its being smaller, and aside from your ability to make it in any kind of outline you want it, once you've got that solid body, you can sand it, taper it, cut it away. The sky's the limit. You can make it any shape you want, and it'll still function as electric guitar. So again, the solid body is lending itself to modification, and once again, the sky's the limit.
I had seen a broadcaster, and the guitar player let me fool with the thing during intermission, and it was an excellent playing guitar. The action was just tremendous. And he was getting some sound out of it that I couldn't possibly get out of my guitar. And he told me about the old Fender. And went out there, and the first thing I did was look up the old Fender. And I bought a Telecaster guitar and a Pro amp. I believe it was the amp. And I didn't have any money, and I paid him $18 a month and swept the floor, and he used my ears. He didn't have any measuring equipment electronically. He couldn't tell sharp from flat, or he couldn't tune, and he didn't know pitch definition or nothing. Bill was a musician, traveled with the band, and also he was a studio musician. And then Bill used to go out and field test a lot of the things we did. He would take the instrument out with a different kind of pickup or a different kind of part, whatever it was, and he would try it. Bill was very big help in all these new design. And Jim Ryan. And of course, soon after that, we provided some guitars for him to use, and this set the thing really rolling because everybody wanted to play like Jim Ryan. Don Randall was also pushing Leo to add another guitar to the line, and so Freddie Tavares came on board about then. He drew this instrument up. Now, after Freddie Tavares came on board, he not only was a good engineer, musically he was such a genius. And so it was much easier for Freddie to be a conduit of your own ideas and get things done then, because he knew what you were talking about. Bill played a Telecaster, but he wasn't very pleased with it. For one of the reasons, you couldn't adjust each string individually on the bridge for its height and length, for the inclination of the string. Bill says, or lengthened or shortened to make the proper intonation. Now, the intonation means when you know the string down to some particular note, that thing doesn't note in tune, then you may have to adjust your length of your string. See, from the string, from the bone nut to the bridge, is set a certain length. And all these other notes are set accordingly because that's the string. But if you find a note in it that's not noted properly, it means this string, where you're noting to the top of the bridge is the wrong length. 6 bridge sections, you just had to have in order to make the thing get it better. You guys can borrow my guitar and not bring it back. So good. Especially the guys who know it down there. So I get down and check it out. And I think, go out with the video and record them in the orange over there and see the guy with the old Fender and get him to make them one line. That kind of involved on the Telecaster, on the basic plan of the Telecaster.
kind of pickup from different ones, many guys. This type of work that is designed, that's part of it. And finally, you get something put together